Sleep Token, the band no one will shut up about. Best known for their genre-bending music, elite musicianship, extensive lore, and unique image. Obviously, they have a marketing guru who is absolutely killing it. However, no amount of marketing would save them from bad music. So today, I want to dive into the genius of Sleep Token's songwriting. It's pretty easy to get lost in the mystery of Sleep Token. A quick Google search will show you it's very difficult to pin down one genre for the band. Also, the image and lore are not that clearly defined, and the lyrics are very rarely one-dimensional. But it's important to know that what makes music like this impactful is not what one particular element is doing, but how that element moves through time and the different contexts that it's presented in. And I feel like this is a defining characteristic of the band. No individual piece of the puzzle can be seen as one specific thing. You're encouraged to look for your own meaning and find your own way through the music. Much like a dream, Sleep Token want to take you through an experience that makes you feel something, even if it doesn't make logical sense. So in typical Jake fashion, I'm going to break down some specific things they do and make it make logical sense to you so you can use it in your own compositions. Chapter 1. Atmosphere. Quick interjection here, I know very little about the background or lore of Sleep Token and I can only do so much research. For that reason, I will be mostly focusing on the information that I extracted directly from the music, how that affects me, and what I would do to replicate it. If I get something wrong, please let me know below. Many listeners say that Sleep Token are one of the few bands that actually make them feel something. Sleep Token uses a few practices to achieve this. Number 1, slower music. Slowing things down gives the listener a chance to reflect. Number 2, playing with expectations. Clearly, lots of Sleep Token will move in unpredictable ways, and I often found myself asking whether this is supposed to be a verse, a chorus, a bridge, a variation, or something else altogether. Number 3 is energetic movements. As will be discussed at great length in this video, lots of Sleep Token's approach to composition is how energy moves through time. Now, these 3 ideas on their own are relatively common in music. However, when they are the driving forces of the song, they simply feel different. If we simplify these concepts, we can put them all under the umbrella of the atmosphere of the song. This could also mean the mood or the vibe, but to keep it simple, let's just call it all atmospheres. Our goal should then be to monitor the atmosphere and see how it changes through a song. The way that Sleep Token create these atmospheres falls into 3 different categories. The first is tone and instrumentation, the second is through careful tension and release, and the third is through theme and variation. For tone and instrumentation, Sleep Token utilize a fairly standard metal ensemble. What sets them apart here is the space that the instruments occupy. The vocals will often have loads of reverb or effects that are not typical for metal, and there are synth pads baked into basically everything. At some points, the guitars will be aggressive and percussive and in your face. Other times, they will kind of move into the background and feel more like they're a synth pad. The bass might be a background element in some moments, and then other moments it will be the driving force of the song. The drums sometimes will just simply stop playing and let the song float along. If you take a standard metal ensemble and play it in a standard way, you're going to get metal. But if you fuck with the roles and functions of each of these instruments throughout a song, you get a unique atmosphere. The second category for atmospheres is tension and release. Tension and release is most often associated with the harmony and melody, but I personally like to think about it more dynamically than that. If you think about building and releasing tension with a drum beat, or with lyrics, or the tonal shifts of a specific instrument, you get far more creative possibilities. Yes, Sleep Token use loads of tension and release in their harmony and melody, but we'll talk about that in the next section. For now, I want to focus on the energetic tension and release. Pick pretty much any Sleep Token song and pay attention to the macro dynamic changes. Often their sections will end in what feels like white noise. As the section progresses, more and more instruments join in to create this massive wall of sound before a huge shift in energy that signifies a new section of the song. The slowly building tension may not be obvious or conscious, but when it breaks, you feel the relief. Once again, these things do not need to be noticed by the logical part of your brain, but it should make you feel something. And the concept of feeling something bleeds into number 3, theme and variation. Trance music of the 90s is a genre of music specifically focused on taking its listeners through a semi-hypnotic experience. People who don't like it think it sounds like mindless repetitive bullshit, but the people who enjoy it love it because it bypasses their logical brain and takes them on a journey. I found lots of examples of semi-hypnotic ideas that Sleep Token used through their songs. Whether it's through rhythm, melody, or sound design, it was really obvious obvious to me how often they rely on this technique. They will often hold one idea steady and change the elements around that. It really depends on the track, but maybe there's a melody that stays the same while the chords underneath go for a little detour to new and wonderful places. Maybe a rhythm is established and then the drums move to a new place while the rest of the band maintains the pulse that we're expecting. Using Granite as an example, the melodic synth that sets up the main theme for the song, once it sets up the idea, it does not change. The bass line plays one idea in the verse that starts on the 4th scale degree. In the chorus, the pattern is nearly identical except that it starts on the 1st scale degree. The only other things that change in this song are the melody and instrumentation, and yet it feels like a whole song. All that I've covered so far can be hard to quantify because atmospheres are heavily reliant on context. So let's move to something a little more concrete and look at Chapter 2, Melody and Harmony. Melodically, I found Sleep Token to be very simple. Most of their melodies stick pretty strictly to the pentatonic scale, which in case you didn't know is the most common scale used to write any melody ever. But just because it's simple or common doesn't mean we should overlook it because there is a lot to learn here. In my video about Shinedown, I mentioned their heavy use of the 4th scale degree and how that helps them write long and engaging melodies. Sleep Token employ a very similar tactic with a heavy reliance on the 4th scale degree. To give a quick recap on what was discussed with Shinedown, the 1st, 3rd, and 5th scale degrees feel very stable, the 2nd, 4th, and 6th feel unstable, and the 7th can flirt between instability and stability depending on the context. Using unstable scale degrees consistently makes it feel like the melody is unresolved. This encourages your listeners to hang around until they get that closure. But be careful though, if your melody never resolves, then people won't want to listen to it. Through the verse of the summoning, we're met with 2 very simple ideas. One is the riff, which is 3 notes. I think the most interesting thing about this is the use of dotted rhythms. Melodically, what can you see? 2 notes, that's it, the 3rd and 4th scale degree. Often, if a musical idea is mostly sustained on one note, like this riff or like this melody, then the note can act like a drone. If the note is sustained longer than you expect, you start expecting something to change. And guess what? That expectation serves to increase tension. If we move to the chorus, aside from the changing key, there's nothing that really sticks out to me as being massively important in terms of the note or chord choice. But there is a clear release of tension. The melody is quite pleasant, the chords feel somewhat predictable, and the rhythm is far easier to digest. Pro tip, this is how a chorus should function. It should be a release of tension, giving our listeners a sense of connection that they so desperately need. If this chorus was as tense as the verse, then our listeners would have a much harder time to connect with our song. Moving to the bridge, guess which melody note is dominant here? That's right, the 4th. Even when the melody is more flowery in the first part of the bridge, the 4th note is dominant. When it's simplified, the 4th note is one of the only notes that remains. The chordal movements in Aqua Regia are jazzy as fuck. Let's look at it quickly. The song is largely in F sharp minor. That means these chords belong in the scale. Looking at the bridge, here are the chords that are used. To save you some time comparing, the chords in green belong to F sharp minor. The chords in red belong to another key, which I believe is E minor. This has jazz written all over it. Jazz is all about tension and release. You can hear the tension as these chords move, and you can hear the melody connected all together. The key to understanding the harmony and melody of Sleep Token is to understand when to complicate things and when to keep things simple. You can get away with some very weird, tense, complicated musical ideas if you connect it in a simple way. Chapter 3, Lyrics. I mentioned that Sleep Token lyrics have depth and are often open to interpretation. Looking at Alkaline, I think we're given a great example of this. To look at some basic lyrical techniques first, the chorus has a rhyming pattern that simply ends each line on an imperfect rhyme. The number of syllables and how they scan remains relatively consistent. If we look at the first verse, however, we have some slightly more interesting rhyming patterns embedded within the phrase. There's the obvious use of repetition with changes, and then an imperfect rhyme with me and beneath, and the internal rhyme between altered and something, where the word something has been adjusted massively to make the rhyme work. Topically, it's about a guy that has an obsession with a girl. With a basic observation, we can support this hypothesis in greater detail. For example, obviously the word alkaline points us towards the pH scale, which leans us towards chemistry. The context immediately becomes a chemical attraction that this guy is experiencing that is changing him. I think this is a beautiful and interesting metaphor. Then as we move to the chorus, we get a whole bunch of lyrics that essentially back up and support what has been established. As the song continues on, the scientific metaphors deepen and display that the change within him is nearing a spiritual experience, which I think is fantastic. Too many songs draw on too many topics and too many metaphors just to say one simple thing. Very rarely are we given huge amounts of depth into one particular topic. You should be able to guess how it smells, feels, tastes, or looks to be in that particular situation. sensation, and lyrics that engage one or more of our senses give us a greater sense of depth and connection with the lyric itself. Now, looking beyond face value, can we definitively say that this song is about how a girl has changed him? I don't think so. There's no part of these lyrics that say what he's talking about is outside his body. It could well be, but it's equally as likely that it isn't. It could be a festering thought that he is labeled as she. And if this is true, the context immediately changes to he's had a shift within himself. Maybe she is a struggle with something that hurts him, like a drug or alcohol addiction. The seductive desire of yet another drink changes people chemically. And although some drugs, like acid, clearly lean towards one end of the pH scale, it doesn't mean that his drug isn't neutral. And a funny thought that I had about this is what happens if he's actually talking about water? Water technically fits all of the criteria of the lyrics. And I feel like I can connect all the lyrics of this song to water when I'm feeling dehydrated. But yet, if someone were to ask me to write a song about a cup of water, I'd probably find it quite difficult. This may seem like mental masturbation, but I'm hoping to make you think in different ways here. Sleep Token make a habit of being vague because we humans tend to project meaning onto things that are vague. If you're wanting to make someone feel something, give them just enough information and let them take control. Don't let your need to be understood influence someone else's experience. Chapter 4, what to do about all this. I think the sleep token phenomenon is about self-reflection. The way they build up anticipation, bring you to climaxes, and then take you somewhere else entirely invites you to participate in whichever way that you want. Even though loads of what we've discussed today are relatively simple musical ideas, the genius comes in how they connect them together to get a whole that is infinitely greater than the sum of the parts. Don't get me wrong, while these concepts are simple, writing in this way is not easy. You need to create an atmosphere that moves you emotional, and then fuck with that in infinite ways without letting one instrument get lazy. It requires careful attention to develop your ideas to the point where they inspire self-reflection, but not so much that people get bored or disengage from the music. I believe Sleep Token's approach to songwriting is about testing themselves in new ways. If you're asking yourself open-ended questions that invite connection between two unconnected ideas, you'll start approaching your own compositions in new and creative ways. Sure, it may not sound exactly like Sleep Token, but I believe that this is the way that they develop their skills. If you want to copy them, then borrow their tones, their chords, their melodic choices, and their lyrical topics. But if you want to create your own music, then use what you've learnt in this video as a launching pad to craft your own voice. What band or genre would you like me to cover next? Please leave it in the comments below. See you next time.